On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we have a fantastic panel. Mr. Curtis Franklin, Mr. Brian Chee here today. Now, we've heard a lot about Starlink in the past and just how fast they deployed their satellites. Well, we found out this week they may have deployed them a little too quickly. We'll get into what happened. Plus, the Internet of Things and operational technologies in smart buildings are essential to make hybrid work safer and better for people. Today, we have CEO of Buildings IoT, Mr. Brian Turner, on the show. We'll talk about simple solutions that can actually increase building health and reduce utility costs, even energy consumption, and even cyber risk. Lots to talk about. Definitely shouldn't miss it. TWiT on the set.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 480, recorded February 11th, 2022. Build IoT and they will automate. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by IT Pro TV. Give your team a fun and entertaining IT development platform to level up their skills. Volume discounts start at 5 seats. Go to itpro.tv/enterprise. Make sure to mention Enterprise 30 to your designated IT Pro TV account executive to get 30% off or more on a business plan. And by Maresca. Traditional audio conferencing systems can entail lots of components. Installation can take days, and you might not get the mic coverage you need. That's complex, expensive. But Maresca Audio is easy to install and manage, no technicians required, and you get true full room coverage. That's easy economical. Learn more at nareva.com. And by Linode. Get the cloud support experience you deserve with Linode. No tiers, no handoffs. Get $100 in credit. Visit linode.com/TWiT. Welcome to TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and the geek who just wants to know how this world's connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide through this big world of the enterprise. But I definitely can't guide you by myself. I need to bring in the professionals, the experts in their field, starting with our very own friend, Mr. Brian Chee. He's net architect at Sky Fiber and all-around tech geek. Cheebert, how are you doing, and what's keeping you busy?
I'm doing good, and I've been watching fishies. I finally managed to get some Axis webcams up online. The first one is a low light camera and shades of the old fish tank screensaver. That is live. The depth is about 30 meters, and it's about half a kilometer off Waikiki Beach on the island of Oahu. I shared a link that we'll share again as time goes on. It has a whole bunch of live instruments that you can get to. And as time goes on, I will be adding more Axis webcams. There it is. So that is live data. It is similar, almost identical to the equipment that we have at 5,000 meters depth, 85 miles north of the island. We're trying to make it so that we can prototype in shallow water and then move it to the really deep water. And eventually, if we ever get the ability, we're going to put it into truly deep water along transoceanic cables. So we can also do things like tsunami detection and things like that.
Very cool, very cool. We always share a lot of the interesting stuff. Always great to have you here. Well, speaking of experts, we have the man that has the pulse of the enterprise and security. He's a senior analyst at Omdia, and he's the very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, how are you, my friend? How's everything going, and what's keeping you busy?
Oh, I am fine, Lou. It's great to be here. A wonderful way to wrap up the week. It's been a busy week working on research for various sorts of training and testing for human beings, not so much the technology. Looking at MITRE's new Defend data graph and just trying to stay out of trouble. Also starting to get ready for IWCE, where I'm scheduled to be a speaker in March. And believe it or not, starting to get lots of queries already about RSA, which is supposed to be happening face-to-face in June. and even Black Hat. August will be here before we know it.
Indeed. Looking forward to it. Well, speaking of a busy week, it's been a special busy week in the enterprise as well, so we'll definitely cover some of that on the show. Now, you may have heard of SpaceX's Starlink. Now, it can offer a lot to all of us, but this past week, some interesting events impacted their satellites as a geomagnetic storm hit them pretty hard. We'll definitely talk about what it means, and maybe they should have been prepared for that. Now, the Internet of Things and operational technology and smart buildings are essential to make hybrid work safe and better for people. We all know that. Now, today we have CEO of Buildings IoT, Brian Turner, on the show. We're going to talk about simple, actionable solutions that can increase building health, reduce utility costs, energy consumption, carbon emissions, and even help with cyber risk. A lot of great topics to talk about, so definitely stick around for later on TWiT. But first, like we always do, let's go ahead and jump into this week's news blips. Now, botnets continue to bring havoc across the internet to organizations and networks. Now, 2 years ago, researchers stumbled upon one of the internet's most intriguing botnets, a previously undiscovered network of 500 servers, many in well-known universities and businesses around the world, that was impervious to normal takedown methods. Now, after lying low for 16 months, those researchers said that the botnet known as Fritz Frog is back with new capabilities and a larger base of infected machines. Fritz Frog targets just about anything with an SSH or secure shell, such as a server cloud instances, data center servers, routers alike. Plus, it installs an unusually advanced payload that was written from scratch. Now, it was a decentralized peer-to-peer architecture that distributed administration among many infected nodes rather than a central server, making it hard to actually detect or take it down using those traditional methods. Now, Fritz Frog spreads by scanning the internet for SSH servers, and when it finds one, it then attempts to log in using a list of credentials. Now, when successful, the botnet software actually installs proprietary malware and makes it drone in a sprawling, headless peer-to-peer network. Now, each server constantly listens for connections on port 1234 while simultaneously scanning thousands of IP addresses over ports 22 and 222. Now, when it encounters other infected servers, the servers exchange data with each other to ensure all of them are running the latest malware version and have the most up-to-date database of targets and infected machines. Now, the latest version can actually proxy outgoing SSH connections using the Tor privacy network as well. Now, this proxy forms a network of nodes that allows users to mask the origins of their commands and conceal themselves in an encrypted tunnel. Now, commands are passed from node to node until they reach their destination, so each node is only aware of its direct neighbors. Now, the latest version also uses the secure copy protocol to copy itself to remote compromised servers. Now, the list of 30 commands found from previously were for running scripts and downloading databases, logs, or files, has also been expanded. That's right, it's been expanded to the ability to target sites when running things like WordPress content management systems. And because the malware doesn't store any files on disk, it's particularly difficult to spot. Now, what can you actually do? Well, if you run SSH servers, you should check a list of compromise indicators to actually detect infections on your network. So get started doing that right now.
Well, and under the category of there's just no safe space anymore, Linux malware is on the rise. With Linux frequently used as the basis for cloud services, virtual machine hosts, and container-based infrastructure, attackers have increasingly targeted Linux environments with sophisticated exploits and malware. New analysis based on telemetry collected from attacks on VMware customers shows an increasing number of ransomware programs targeting Linux hosts to infect virtual machine images or containers, more use of cryptojacking to monetize illicit access, and more than 14,000 instances of Cobalt Strike, 56% of which are pirated copies used by criminals or thrifty companies that have just, decided not to buy a license. While attackers may not be shifting completely from Windows to Linux, the level of activity shows that they are increasingly targeting Linux as well. And that's according to Brian Baskin, lead for VMware's Threat Analysis Unit. Initial access is often not through exploitation, but through credential theft. While remote code execution is the second most popular way to breach such systems, such as exploitation of the Log4j vulnerabilities, stolen credentials often give attackers more time to explore inside a victim's network before they're detected. Following initial access, however, a variety of Linux-based malware is brought to bear, from ransomware to crypto miners to implants from remote access management software like Cobalt Strike. Attackers have developed a broad range of tools with which to compromise and monetize compromised Linux systems. Attackers also are starting to use more sophisticated tools to manage their attacks on Linux infrastructure. For example, Cobalt Strike is a Windows-focused attack management system used by red teams and pen testers, but attackers are now using it in Linux campaign. VMware investigation into Cobalt Strike servers found 14,000 servers by downloading the implants from the staging server and then deconstructing the information in the file to gather more specific information. The group found that 1 in 6 versions of the Cobalt Strike program had a customer ID of 0, indicating it was a trial version, but those are most likely cracked copies. 4 other custom IDs accounted for nearly 40% of the remaining Cobalt Strike servers, indicating that protection on those servers, well, was also deeply compromised.
Now, if you are to believe what the current administration is saying, about 5 years from now, a common complaint about electric vehicles, range anxiety, will be a thing of the past across much of the U.S. Starting this year, the federal government will begin doling out $5 billion to states over 5 years to build a nationwide network of fast chargers. The plan initially focuses on the interstate highway system, directing states to build 1 charging station every 50 miles. Those stations must be capable of charging at least 4 electric vehicles simultaneously at 150 kilowatts. While the story goes on about how the money distribution will mimic normal federal highways money, but with some assurances on availability built in so that chances of rolling into a charging station and find 0 functional chargers shouldn't happen. Considering just how much is being plowed into electrified shipping vehicles, and I would say both trucks and rail, the feds needed to get in front of the range anxiety problems quickly, and I sure hope this dream actually happens.
The fusion has always been a real fascinating topic to me, so I wanted to end the week with a positive outlook for it in the future. Now, nuclear fusion promises a plentiful supply of low carbon energy using the same process that powers the sun. Now, existing nuclear power is based on fission, where a heavy chemical element is split to provide a lighter one. Now, nuclear fusion works by combining 2 light elements to make a heavier one. Now, for fusion to become economically viable, it must first actually generate more energy than the amount being put in. But no one has yet reached this point, despite an 8-decade effort to build a star on Earth. Now, in order to overcome challenges, it's going to take disruptive technology and people to lead it. Now, there's a company out there, TAE, might be that company to help us get us there. Now, the company's 30-meter-long fusion cylinder called C2W Norman, after its TAE's founder, represents a different approach to the donut shape to be used for the world's biggest fusion experiment. Now, controlling plasma at tens of millions of degrees requires a finely tuned system. By using machine learning, that's right, machine learning, the company optimizes the fusion device as it goes along, as well as after the fact. Now, optimizations or tuning for the best performance is carried out when something on the device changes, such as new hardware being added. Now, machine learning has accelerated their efforts quite a bit. In fact, especially when they can reconstruct what's going on during the fusion experiment after the fact. Now, the Norman device powers its reactions with regular hydrogen, and they're soon to be targeting boron. Now, this produces no neutron particles at all, and therefore little radioactivity, making machines straightforward to service and actually maintain. Now, their goal here is within a decade, produce net energy where the output from fusion exceeds the energy supplied to initiate its reactions. I, for one, are rooting for them. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, the bites. But before we get to the bites, we do have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's IT Pro TV. Now, your IT team needs the skills and knowledge to ensure your business is a success. And with IT Pro TV, more than 80% of users who start a video actually finish it. That's right. This is 2.5 times greater than average e-learning platforms, because IT Pro TV offers training that's fun and it's entertaining. Now, give your team the tools they need to make your business thrive. Courses are engaging, they're binge-worthy, keeping your team interested and vested in learning. Now, the tech industry is evolving. It's changing rapidly, and your team needs to be trained today. Now, when a new software release, system upgrade, or cyber threat faces your business, IT Pro TV offers the training and perspectives of those disruptions within days, if not hours. Now, why is IT Pro TV right for your business? Well, let's talk about it. Get all training and certifications for your team done all in one place. Now, IT Pro TV has every vendor and skill you need for your IT team training. Now, they provide Microsoft IT training, Cisco training, Linux training, Apple training, security, cloud, and a lot more. Over 5,800 hours worth, ranging from technical skills to compliance to soft skills. Now, you can do so much with IT Pro TV business plans, actually. Think about this. Track your team's results, manage your seats, assign unassigned team members, and access monthly usage reports. See those metrics like logins, viewing time, tracks complete, and more. Now, easily manage your teams as well. Manage subsets of users or teams by providing them with customized assignments, monitoring progress, reporting on usage of the platform. Assignments can be full courses and or individual episodes within the courses. Now, advanced reporting is there as well. You get immediate insights into your team's viewing patterns and progress over any period of time with deep visual reports. Don't forget that IT Pro TV has individual plans too. That's right. Give your team the IT development platform they need to level up their skills while enjoying the journey. For teams of 2 to 1,000, volume discounts start at 5 seats. Go to itpro.tv/enterprise. Make sure to mention Enterprise 30 to your designated IT Pro TV account executive to get 30% off or more on a business plan. And we thank IT Pro TV for their support of This Week and Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now time for the bites. Now, we've all heard a lot about Starlink in the past. Some are actually not happy about how it's being deployed. Well, based on this past week, it may have been deployed just a little bit too quickly. What's going on, Curtis?
Well, you know, Stars Fell on Alabama is a really neat old song, but Starlink fell into the Atlantic. Well, that's just expensive. On February 3rd, SpaceX launched the latest batch of 49 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit. Now, here's what happens with these if you don't keep up. They put these satellites into orbit at about 130 miles up. Once they're in orbit, then the satellites boost themselves up to their operational orbit of roughly 340 miles. The problem is that this last week, while they were in the lower orbit, a geomagnetic storm hit. There was a big solar flare which sent giant cosmic ray bursts heading towards the Earth, and they struck. Now, what happened was not the sort of normal things that we think about with solar storms. It's not that the EMP got all of these satellites. It's that it slightly warmed the atmosphere, which increased the density of the upper atmosphere and increased the drag on the satellites. That meant that 40 of the 49 were dragged into a lower orbit before they could start boosting. And when that happened, well, they were no longer able to boost themselves to their upper orbit. There are already some photos of some of these satellites disintegrating over the North Atlantic. And according to SpaceX, each and every one of these 40 will fully disintegrate. They say that they are designed so that if something happens, they won't create space junk, and they will break up so completely in the atmosphere that nothing that matters will hit the surface of the Earth. Now, this was a multi-million-dollar problem for SpaceX. And if you're Elon Musk, it's probably, the kind of change that you find in your sofa cushions. But for most companies, it would be a really big hit. It's also the second time in a week that a bunch of satellites didn't make it to orbit. Astra also lost a payload of 4 satellites a couple of days ago. Now, as I said, most of the time when we talk about geomagnetic storms and problems with satellites, we're thinking about the EMP, the electromagnetic pulse or the electromagnetic problem that would hit them. And most satellites are designed to have a sleep status where they can essentially shut down and often even turn themselves so that special shielding is to the source of the radiation, the sun. They do that until the waves of electronic interference go past and they go back to normal operation. This was an example of the fact that there's more going on up there, especially in the upper ranges of the atmosphere than we generally think. Now, Lou, I'm going to ask you, as someone who deals with business systems all the time, does something like this make you think twice about the suitability of Starlink or a Starlink-like service for business purposes? Is it just not sufficiently reliable, or is this one of those 1 in a million things that we're just going to pass off as stuff happens?
I definitely think that they're going to learn by their mistake. Let's hope that they do, because obviously it's a very expensive mistake. I think traditionally, Starlink hasn't been really targeting businesses. I think they've been targeting more of maybe the small business to consumer, especially in people who are in areas that don't have good internet connections. And I think this is a good reason why the reliability needs to be there in order to maintain consistent business connectivity. So I definitely feel like this is going to impact people's viewpoints on that. And my guess is they might hurt some of their deals based off of all that. Obviously, with any time you have a system, a network, a connection, you have to have redundancy, which is why a lot of on-premise networks, they have cellular to back it up, and they want to make sure that everyone has connection all the time, especially in times of crisis. And I think when things like this happen, it'll hurt their credibility with business. So I am hoping that they eventually will find a way to, obviously this type of thing is going to happen. These are real world things. These types of storms are going to be around for a very, very long time, and they're going to have to be able to handle these things. Obviously other satellites do. So they're going to have to figure out a way to handle it at this level of orbit.
Very true. It's the sort of thing that, as you say, solar storms are the sort of thing that you have to plan for because they do happen on a periodic basis. I won't say regular, but certainly periodic. Brian, I want to turn to you. You have worked with a lot of satellite communications and satellites, various sorts of instrumentation. It seems strange to think that the solar flare could have thickened our upper atmosphere enough to do this. Is this the kind of thing that the satellite company, Starlink, should have anticipated? Or is this the sort of thing that's sufficiently rare that there's no way they could have built in protections?
I think this is one of those, really? The problem is not a whole lot of people do anything in low Earth orbit. That's pretty rarefied territory. And that's one, in my mind, that's one of the reasons why Starlink can get away with putting so many satellites up there. Now, the people that really do have the experience with low Earth orbit and so forth is actually NASA and the National Reconnaissance Office, because in a similar thing, you get things like the SR-71 and the A-12s, the high-speed spy planes, which also is the domain of NASA. NASA actually was running an SR-71 for a little while, and they also run U-2 giant gliders, the old first-generation spy planes. Those are running in a similar altitude. It's got atmosphere. So it's something that, maybe there are people with experience, but they're all keeping mum because they've been in a very classified arena. So maybe this is something that should have been shared, maybe under a non-disclosure of some sort. Now, one of the things that has been shared and shared ad nauseum is EMP proofing your devices. So as Curt mentioned, that shielding is heavy. It takes up weight and mass costs money to get into orbit. So the satellites tend to turn their good side, so to speak, the shielded side, towards the source. Also, one of the things that happens is there are very, very special order processes in place so that the circuits that you use, you order them EMP hardened. I actually bought some of those. Interestingly enough, the material that they use, instead of the standard resin to coat your integrated circuits, they use a completely different set of compounds. Interesting enough, the building of those compounds means the circuits also don't have any voids in them, meaning air bubbles of some sort, because air bubbles, when it gets hit by EMP blast, superheats the air and it explodes. The same thing happens when you work with undersea observatories. When you're starting to deal with that kind of pressure, 3, 4, 5,000 pounds per square inch, you don't want any voids. So if you don't have any voids, you can actually put the circuits out into the water itself instead of having to put it into the pressure housing, which costs a ton of money. Anyway, there's a lot of lessons that have been learned. And I think this is one of those lessons where, the people that had the knowledge work in a very, very classified arena and probably weren't given permission to share that with the SpaceX people. So maybe it's time some of that gets declassified and shared with, Elon Musk and his band of merry men and women. Don't know. We'll see.
There really is a bunch of information that is out there in the hands of various national organizations. And as we get more towards the commercialization of space and the commercial launches, as Brian says, it might be time for there to be more sharing of information, perhaps file off some of the classified serial numbers, but let the operators know what's going on. This is a good reminder that even though we talk about space beginning at 60 miles up, our atmosphere extends considerably farther than that. Another good reason for lots and lots of people to take a closer look at this thin, relatively, layer of life-giving air that we breathe, even when it's up at an altitude where breathing would be a serious chore.
Next up is my favorite part of the show. But before we get to that, we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Nareva. Now, complicated and costly, that's been the state of audio conferencing for a larger spaces for a long, long time. Now, choosing a traditional system might entail difficult design software and selecting from a dizzying array of separate mics, speakers, DSPs, and much, much more. Now, installation usually requires outside technicians and is often highly invasive and expensive. Now, it could take your room offline for many, many days. I remember a lot of technicians used to come into our conference rooms and switch things out, and things didn't work for a while. And the industry was definitely primed for the same type of leap in technology that had transformed and simplified other sectors. Now, Nareva made that leap when they created revolutionary microphone mist technology. Now, with this patented technology, 1 or 2 integrated microphone and speaker bars fill a room with thousands of virtual microphones. There are no dead zones, and everyone can be heard everywhere in the room. Now, meeting and class participants can simply just talk and move naturally in the space and still be heard by remote participants. Thanks to continuous auto calibration, your rooms are instantly and always ready with optimized audio. No outside technicians required. Now, Nareva also simplified installation. It's a 30-minute do-it-yourself job. That means big savings on time and cost compared to traditional systems. They simplified management too. That's right. Nareva Console gives IT the power to monitor and manage and adjust their systems from anywhere they want. No need for IT to go from room to room. So ask yourself if you want to go with the costly and complicated traditional system or make the leap to simple and economical Nareva. Learn more at nareva.com. That's NUREVA.com. And we thank Nareva for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's my favorite part of the show. We actually get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the TWiT Riot. And today we have CEO of Buildings IoT, Mr. Brian Turner. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Now, Brian, our audience loves to hear people's origin stories. Can you take us through a journey through tech and how you ended up at Buildings IoT?
Yeah, it's quite an unusual journey. I actually started off in college thinking I was going to go into business, ended up transforming over to psychology and then ultimately human factor psychology. From there, it really started strictly into building automation. Got my first job at Johnson Controls as a technician, went on to do some further studies, really figured I could apply not only my interest in tech and software engineering, but also, the entire world of human factors and how humans interact with society and nature and how the earth and everything interacts with humans as well. So it really just led me to a good place there.
Right. Now, building. This is a very interesting topic because obviously it's the amalgamation. It's the joining of technology, traditional methods of managing buildings and properties. And I'm sure there's probably lots of different facets I've never heard of and complications to go along with it. But I guess it'd be great to just go through some traditional things that you're seeing that technology is actually helping when you're managing properties. And then I kind of want to get into how that's kind of evolved over time.
Yeah, sure. So, the most basic is really your HVAC control. So the systems that provide heating, air conditioning, and ventilation into the buildings to keep people, warm or comfortable in the space. And that's been around for, 50, 60 years, starting way before we actually had electronic systems doing these types of automation. I've been in the business for 24 years now. And to see the evolution from that to when we started integrating metering so that we could actually be more intelligent about how much energy is being consumed by these systems, to then integrating lighting. And I would say that those three systems became the core of what a smart building might look like in the 90s and in the early 2000s. And then as more, I would say, focus became, clear on indoor air quality, you started seeing more fresh air ventilation systems being put in and included. But even still, those were still pretty much kept within the context of the HVAC controls. So today we're seeing just a lot more explosion of IoT, and it's really opening the doors for a lot more innovation and use cases to be delivered.
I'm sure IoT has definitely helped here, and I want to get into some of those use cases because there's some interesting ones there. But I do want to get into the trend and how it's evolved too, because obviously over the last several years, we've been kind of forced into very unusual times, a lot of remote workers. How is the pandemic changing this, and how is IoT helping?
Yeah, so the pandemic changed a lot. Obviously, remote workers went home, buildings became empty, shopping centers became empty, healthcare, hospitals became full of different kinds of patients. Elective surgery stopped being there. So revenue streams really changed across a lot of different industries within the built environment. As we've been coming back in various speeds within different verticals, you've definitely seen a lot more attention paid to indoor air quality, occupant health. And of course, they're focused right now on the indoor air quality, but of course, occupant health starts to bring in a whole range of different things from the air quality, the ventilation rates, to lighting, and lots of different air quality things. Typically it's easy to think of things just like CO2, but there's other things like formaldehyde and VOCs, and when there's a fire outside, what does that do to the indoor health environment, and is it still a safe place to be for extended periods of time? So I think it's just brought to attention a lot more systems. And then IoT has actually taken a lot of innovation here, and they've started making what we would typically have thought of as sensors that are part of heating and air conditioning control systems or lighting systems. And they've started to make those systems themselves. So now we have occupancy detection systems. We have HVAC indoor air quality systems. We have systems that are just monitoring humidification and humidity. So now we actually are creating kind of a problem, because where all of those things used to be part of one system, we're now monitoring them across multiple cloud environments. And so, when you talk about IT and security and how all of that and bringing all of that data together to actually implement a lot of these use cases, it's become more critical to really have a good understanding of not only how this data flows, but then how to secure it when you're bringing it back together.
You bring up an interesting topic, because a lot of organizations, sometimes they have to be compliant. They have to do specific things in their buildings. They have to do specific things with their data. How does this complicate things, and how can your solutions and even IoT help here?
Yeah, so, for example, a lot of buildings have decided, hey, I want to make my employees or my tenants comfortable coming back. So we're going to put indoor air quality sensors in all the common areas, and then we'll give our tenants the opportunity to put indoor air quality in their spaces as well. We've also seen, and then that allows for monitoring. It doesn't really allow for control. And then they end up with something on their app. And while that's useful, and they can look at their phone and they can see in their building all of the different indoor air quality spaces, there's really no ability to automatically act on that information. We see the same thing with occupancy detection. So that's another system that's been innovated in the last several years, to where now that's available on an app. And so now building owners can see real-time occupancy. They can know when their building fills up. They can know how many people are in any given space at any given time. And that works well for a lot of use cases, like if you're doing planning, space planning, just trying to understand how your tenants are using the space. But if you're trying to take action on it from a indoor air quality or an energy perspective, you really got to integrate that data back in. And so that starts to bring up some of those challenges. My favorite word, API, starts to become the scapegoat, I think, because everyone has an API, but anyone who's in the business knows that APIs are not created equal, and the finding or figuring out the magic between each API, and then also the security of each API it can be quite daunting when you're looking at hundreds of different IoT technologies out there.
Right. Now, I've seen a lot of organizations use technology. Like, for instance, I've interacted with Aptio before, which they do a lot of analysis of data flows, ensure that IT organizations are spending well and they're finding places to save. And so they basically find a way to ingest all of this data and then do some analytics on it. Now, if a building itself today has data, and they're just kind of onboarding, adding more sensors and that kind of thing, how do they onboard to your platform? Like, do they basically just, again, like you said, maybe use an API? Like, what's the process of getting onboarded and starting seeing that insights?
Yeah, so there's obviously the existing kind of building systems that are out there, and we've got direct connectors into those. But then the IoT systems with their APIs, we have connectors into many of those as well. And then when we don't have a connector to some platform that they want, we'll create that. That allows us to bring it all together, bring it under a common object model, a domain-specific model like a building or a data center, hospital, whatever, and then it can come in and ingest universally into our platform, and analytics can run. And that way it doesn't matter which IoT platform you've chosen, which indoor air quality system, which control system you have. Once it gets to the platform, everything's the same and normalized, and we can really look at data in the way that it's meant to be looked at, rather than trying to look at it one building at a time.
That's great. Now, like a lot of organizations today, I'm sure that are not necessarily really advanced. Like you said, there's a lot of traditional systems out there. Now, when you work with a client, let's say a new client comes on and they say, "Hey, we have these things that we want to do with our system, especially with our building, especially since people are coming back to work or slowly trickling back to work." What is the process? Do you have them go and install new IoT systems throughout the building, CO2 sensors, that kind of thing, or do you make use of what they already have and then tell them where their gaps and their insights are at? How does that work?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. It's a very consultative process. In some cases, a building owner may want to understand just what's happening in their space. They may have a control system in their building. They may not. It may just be everything standalone. Maybe they're smaller building. Maybe they have 10, air handling equipment, devices or on their roof, and they're just distributing air normally with regular thermostats, but they don't really have visibility to what's going on. So they may deploy sensors right away. We may have another client that wants to really understand what's going on amongst different systems. So they have maybe a bunch of siloed databases in their systems, and we'll work to integrate that data and give them a picture of what's going on and give them a better picture of their entire building rather than one system at a time. And then we'll have other ones that their systems are just too old. And so, it starts becoming a planning process of what can we do over the next 4 to 5 years to start to bring these systems up to, modern times and not throwing good money after bad. Because the last thing you want to do is integrate a bunch of technology that's on its end of life. And then immediately once you start to get value out of it, you're then upgrading it and changing it all out. So it just depends on the life cycle of the building and the systems within.
We've been talking with Brian Turner, CEO of Buildings IoT. Lots more to talk about here, and I do want to bring my co-host back in for the roundtable. But before we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Linode. Now, with Linode, you get 100% human free telephone support available worldwide 24/7, 365. Now, Linode's award-winning support team is a highly trained team of service professionals dedicated to finding solutions while providing an unparalleled customer experience. Say no to bad customer service and experience the Linode difference. Now, why choose Linode? Well, Linode's independence and mission drive them to a different standard where the customer is the driving force behind everything they do. Now, they have pay-as-you-go, predictable and transparent pricing. Now, Linode pioneered the predictable flat pricing model for cloud computing. No more anxiety over hidden costs. Now, they make it simple to launch and scale in the cloud. Now, with Linode, you'll get flat pricing across every global data center, and intuitive cloud manager, full-featured API, best-in-class documentation, and that award-winning support. Now, Linode makes it easy to manage your cloud applications and your applications in the cloud. Now, the Linode has proven secure and reliable enterprise-grade infrastructure with 11 data centers worldwide, extensive peering relationships, and their next-generation network. Linode delivers the modern infrastructure and performance you need to innovate at scale. Now, whatever you want to do, including host your website, build your app, store or back up your media, easily launch and enrich your developer applications, hosted services, websites, AI and machine learning, workloads, gaming services, or even those CI/CD environments. Launch and scale in the cloud with their virtual machines. Now, you can choose shared and dedicated compute instances, or you can use your $100 in credit on S3 compatible object storage, managed Kubernetes, and much, much more. The Linode was rated the easiest to use by G2 Crowd in 2021. That's why cloud developers choose Linode, because they make managing complex cloud infrastructure easy with simple bundled pricing, full-featured APIs, and 100% human support. Linode helped pioneer cloud computing back in 2003, 3 years before AWS. So they have the longevity. You can definitely be trusted. Get the cloud support experience you deserve with Linode. No tiers, no handoffs. Get $100 in credit. Visit linode.com/TWiT. That's linode.com/TWiT. And we thank Linode for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we've been talking with CEO of Buildings IoT, Mr. Brian Turner. A lot of interesting stuff going on here. But I do want to bring my co-host back in because they've been in the industry for a while and they have lots of experience with this. And I'm sure they have lots of questions as well. I'll start with Mr. Brian Chee. Brian?
I've got to ask, you're a lot deeper into the building infrastructure management, IoT side of the shop than I have been. Most of my work in IoT has been for science. Now, one of the things I have noticed when I was doing a little bit with smart meters is there seems to be talk of some standards, but the standards seem to be really mushy. Has the industry been driving standards? Are you hearing more talk about it? Or am I just wishing for the moon?
No, the standards have definitely been talked about, and they're deploying standards today. I mean, if you're looking at HVAC controls, heating and air conditioning, ASHRAE has certainly been driving standards for how to control things from an energy efficiency standpoint, all the way down to how to communicate from device to device. Where I think the industry as a whole has been lacking is really adopting standards from IT. We have no problem, trying to connect and get on the data highway of IT, but we certainly haven't seen our industry rushing towards meeting the standards of IT. I do see that changing. We're seeing a lot more use of MQTT. Certainly organizations like Google are starting to press us in that direction as an industry, which I'm really thankful for. And certainly there's other standards like how to model data, how to identify data. And there's just all kinds of different ventures toward that from all of the big companies as well as several other organizations globally.
Well, let me ask you, since we brought up IT, that's my training. I'm a computer scientist by training. The interesting thing is the world of telecom and IT have pretty much merged. We actually talked quite a bit about that in the last episode. Do you think we have a conflict between the two worlds of building management or facilities management and IT, or are we going to start seeing maybe a cautious merging of the two worlds?
Yeah, 10 years ago, I would have said we're going to be completely merged by now. Today, with the emphasis on all of the breaches and all of the, I would say, breach points, now instead of dealing with, dozens of computers in a building that are all breach points, now you've got thousands of IoT devices that are all connected to IP networks, and many of them are even connected to kind of low power wireless networks that are not easily managed with an IT group or even a strong OT group. And so I think that what we're seeing today is something that we've seen a lot in the IT world is we're isolating VLANs, but we're even seeing some organizations choose to completely segregate the business IT infrastructure separate from the operations IT infrastructure. The thing that I keep consulting with our clients on is that regardless of the endpoints connected, the infrastructure itself is still IT and still needs to follow the rules of IT and the understandings and the lessons learned from IT. The thing that IT has to be aware of is that when they come in and manage an OT network and try to use tools that they're familiar with on the IT world, that the OT devices react very, very differently in the way that they pass data along, the bandwidth that they use, and as well as how frequently they need to connect. And so you can't just shut down ports because you think nothing's there anymore, because it might not have woken up for a minute or 90 seconds. And that's a completely normal way to operate for some of these systems. So you just got to be very careful when you're doing it. But I actually believe that while the networks might not completely converge, the overall management and responsibility for the security and the posture of those networks needs to be in the same group.
Yeah, I think connectivity in general is going to be a real interesting problem. I was actually on the DARPA project that was called Sense-It. It was the beginning and got spun off as Zigbee. I've also been working a lot with the LoRa people, long range. Both of those were actually designed for facilities and not for the IT world, but it has been adopted whole hog by the science world. Now, when we start talking about new buildings, because that's what architects love, are we seeing a change in the way those buildings are wired up? Similar to the change that Wi-Fi did. We had to put Wi-Fi cable runs in some odd places when that industry changed. Has IoT started making some odd changes for the building infrastructure wiring and things like that?
There's been some interesting things. So I'm following LoRaWAN quite closely right now. We actually are testing some of the helium network devices, and I'm really curious, how we can really take advantage of blockchain along with LoRaWAN to provide some of the secure connectivity for these IoT devices. And then when you talk about what the infrastructure has to look like if we're going to do that at scale, a lot of these IoT devices are powered by USB. And USB power locations are certainly not something that architects or electrical engineers have been, contemplating for connecting to indoor air quality sensors or thermostats or occupancy detection, right? So there's a lot of potential electrical changes that are necessary. But what it does save on is the whole LAN that you might need to run, and then ultimately switch ports that you're maintaining. So if we can figure out a way to effectively manage the risk of the LoRaWAN, and then if we can get to a comfort level with the helium network and blockchain or networks like that, then I do think we'll actually see that we can not only take care of the Class A buildings, but we can also start approaching those Class B and Class C buildings, which make up overwhelmingly a majority of the square footage in the United States and globally. And right now, those buildings just haven't spent money like those high-end Class A, downtown properties have.
All right. And one of the things you're talking about, these properties, and we've talked about architects. I know that just a few years ago, things like LEED certification and were critically important for both building these commercial structures and for selling them. You're not really hearing as much about that. Are these smart building concepts taking over from what LEED was doing? Is this sort of surpassing LEED in terms of energy use and efficiency?
I think so. So I was always disappointed with LEED because LEED was all about how you built the building, if you were demoing a building or retrofitting it, it had everything to do with, how that construction happened. It had nothing to do with really how you operate. And then it was I would say, more something that you could buy, and it still really encouraged people to value engineer things out. And now we're seeing things like WiredScore come in, and WiredScore, I really like what they're doing because they're not just qualifying the buildings, but they're also starting to certify the system integrators and installers that put these systems in. And WiredScore is taking a much broader look at the facility from not just how the buildings are wired, but how energy efficient they are, as well as what they're doing with the data to make that data available so that if somebody does want to do a digital twin and really create an operational environment that's photorealistic, that they can, because the data has been set up in such a way that it's able to be used in many ways. So it's definitely a good direction, and I see other organizations like WiredScore and SmartScore doing these things.
Well, you talk about the entire use of the building, the way that it feels, the way that it's used, and as we all know, the most efficient building to be constructed is one that's already there. Do you think that one of the things that we're going to see perhaps from the smarter building initiatives, the various ones, is a longer use of some of the buildings, especially when you get out of the city centers? We've seen a lot of buildings in the city edges and the suburban areas where 10, 15 years marks the useful life of some of these buildings. Do you think that we can extend that through the intelligence being put inside the buildings?
Yeah, I do. And I think there's also been a big push in the engineering community overall to really work on reuse and really trying to change the use of the building. Now, certainly if we go back too long and there's a bunch of materials in the building that are unsafe, certainly they'll demo that stuff out. But I have seen a move to convert the use and turn maybe a light manufacturing facility into a lifestyle center with yoga and maybe a gym and something else. So I think there's going to be a lot more of that. And obviously, the more of these technologies that we can use that don't require wholesale infrastructure change, and take advantage of wireless communication protocols that are secure in nature and then can be passed along to some sort of cloud enterprise to be managed. I think that's going to really contribute to the ability to leave these buildings in place and just change the use of them.
That's a really interesting point. And a lot of people assume that when you build in a lot of this intelligence, when you do the cabling, when you do all of the sensor placement, all of that, that it really does create an environment that is purpose-built for a single use. Are you saying that if you do it right, that you can build the external framework, the infrastructure for the building in a way that encourages repurposing rather than locking a building into a single purpose?
Absolutely. I mean, if you just think about the walls and how many cables you have going down walls to different sensors in all the rooms, and even the lighting. I mean, now we're seeing that lighting you can drop in and it's an Ethernet connection right there. And then on the walls, we're seeing wireless used a lot more, so that if I want to remove a wall or move a wall completely, I'm just dealing with the wall itself and not all of the stuff inside. And that can be everything from the light switches to the sensors and so on. We're even seeing a lot more intelligence around how the electrical receptacles are being put in these walls, and so that they can easily be relocated as well, although those can't be completely wireless. So we're definitely seeing a lot more innovation on the vendor side and how they're trying to solve these problems in conjunction with the architects and engineering communities.
Before we close up, I wanted to give you a chance to tell the folks at home where they can find more about Buildings IoT and maybe how they can inquire about options for the properties.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. You can hit us at buildingsiot.com. There's lots of good information there. You can certainly contact us. You can read our blog. There's a lot of great information in our blog about a lot of the topics we talked about today. You can certainly reach me that way or any of our salespeople as well. And I just want to thank you guys for having me on. And this has been a lot of fun to talk about this. Certainly something we're passionate about here.
Thanks again, Brian. Well, I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible. This is a team effort. We definitely have the best team on the industry. We'll start with my co-host. So I got our very own Mr. Brian Chee. Chee, what's going on for you in the coming weeks, and where can people find you and all your work?
I'm doing all kinds of tinkering. I like to tinker, and I am big on IoT in all kinds of forms. I've actually been doing a bunch of research on what kind of lighting I'm going to put into my new studio that I'm in the process of designing. And I'm strongly looking at the new PoE-based lighting systems, which means I can also control it from things like Splunk or whatever, because all these systems have SNMP capability on turning PoE power on the port-by-port basis on and off. But anyway, I rant about this and many, many different things, including LoRaWAN, on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is ADVNETLAB, Advanced Net Lab. And in fact, I first announced just as soon as we had first light on my new underwater camera, I announced that on Twitter first. But if you're not comfortable there, you're welcome to drop me an email. My email is Cheebert, spelled CheeBert @twit.tv. You're also welcome to drop an email to TWiT @twit.tv, and that hits all the hosts. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your show ideas. Yes, quite a few folks have been making suggestions on who we might want to consider to get on the show. Yes, I will try very hard. We shall see how it goes. And, I had a great time talking about building infrastructure and IoT. And, I think we're going to need to get Mr. Turner back on the show so we can dive a little deeper into this topic. What do you guys say?
I agree. Thanks a lot, Cheebert, for being on the show. Well, we also have to thank our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, what's going on for you in the coming weeks, and where can people find you and all your work?
Well, the work stuff tends to happen on Dark Reading at Omdia for those who subscribe to our services, and of course on Twitter at KG4GWA, and on Instagram at Curt_Franklin. Now, one of the interesting things, if you are one of those people who just can't get enough of me, and if so, I truly pity you, you can learn things on my Instagram feed, like about my artwork, running, things like that. I'm always interested in talking about running, always interested in sharing art, and always interested in hearing about what you want to know in the world of cybersecurity.
Well, we definitely can't get enough of you, Mr. Curtis, so definitely check out all of his work. Well, folks, I also want to thank you as well. You're the person who drops in each and every week to watch and listen to our show and get your enterprise goodness. We want to make it easy for you to watch and listen and catch up on your enterprise news. So go to our show page right now, twit.tv/TWiT. There you'll find all of our amazing back episodes, the show notes, the co-host information, the guest information, of course, those links to the stories that we do during the show. But more importantly, next to those videos, you'll get those helpful subscribe and download links. Support the show by getting your audio version, your video version of your choice. Listen on any one of your devices or any one of your podcast applications, because we're definitely on all of them. So definitely subscribe and actually support the show. Plus, you may have heard we also have Club TWiT. That's right. It's a members-only ad-free podcast service with a bonus TWiT Plus feed that you can't get anywhere else, and it's only $7 a month. Now, one of my favorite things that goes along with that is Club TWiT. It's an exclusive access to members-only Discord channel. That's right. Some really fun, interesting topics, some amazing channels out there that talk about all different tech topics, all different channels. I really love the conversation. So definitely join it and be part of the conversation. Join Club TWiT, be part of that movement. Go to twit.tv/Club TWiT. Now, remember, they also offer corporate group plans as well for Club TWiT. It's a great way to give your team access to our ad-free tech podcast. The plans start with 5 members at a discounted rate of $6 each per month, and you can add as many seats as you like. Now, this is really a great way for your IT department, your developers, your sales team, your tech teams to stay up to date and access all of our podcasts. Plus, it's just like regular memberships because they can join the TWiT Plus and the TWiT Discord server and get that TWiT Plus bonus feed as well. So a lot of great features and a lot of great options for your team. Plus, remember, it's also time for that TWiT audience survey. It's a great way for us to get some information from you. The annual survey helps us understand our audience so we can make your listening experience even better. It only takes a few minutes to fill out. So go to twit.tv/survey22. That's twit.tv/survey22 to take it. It only takes a couple minutes. I'd love to hear from you. Now, after you subscribe, you can impress your family members, your friends, your coworkers with the gift of TWiT. We'll talk about a bunch of fun tech topics on the show each and every week, and I guarantee they will find it fun and interesting as well. So definitely share it with them and have them subscribe. Now, if you've always subscribed and you're available on Fridays, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time, we do the show live. That's right. You can check it out at live.twit.tv. There's our stream. You can come see the behind the scenes, how the pizza's made. Come see all the banter that we do during the show. And you can see also the mistakes that we make. Plus, if you're going to watch the show live, you can jump into the chat room live as well. It's our irc.twit.tv chat room. So go right now to irc.twit.tv. So a lot of great characters, some reoccurring people in there, but also a lot of new people each and every week. And so we have a lot of great conversations. We get topics for the show, questions for our guests, a lot of fun stuff in there. So definitely check out and be part of that crew as well. Now, definitely hit me up on twitter.com/LouMM. I post all my enterprise tidbits out there. We have a lot of great conversations. I post some interesting stuff out there. Plus, I have show discussions as well. You want to see what's on the show? You want to offer some ideas on the show? Definitely hit me up on a DM or even just on Twitter itself. So definitely check that out. And if you want to see what I do during my normal work week at Microsoft, definitely go check out right now, developers.microsoft.com/office. There we post all the amazing and great ways for you to make Office a platform and make it work for you. So if you want to customize macros to do things automated for your Excel documents, your Word documents, whatever, go check out the latest and greatest ways to do that using our Office platform. I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support This Week in Enterprise Tech each and every week, and we couldn't do the show without them. So thank you for all their support over the years. And also thank you to all the engineers and staff at TWiT as well. I do want to thank Mr. Brian Chee just one more time, because he's not only our co-host, but he's also our tireless producer as well. He does all the bookings and the plannings for the show, and we really couldn't do the show without him. So thank you again, Cheebert, for all your support. Now, before we sign out, I do want to thank our editor for today, Anthony. Plus, I also want to thank our talented TD as well. He's Mr. Ant Pruitt, and he does an amazing show here on TWiT called Hands On Photography. Ant, what's going on this week in Hands On Photography?
Well, Mr. Lou, this time I am continuing my little module on video editing. So we're stepping it up a little bit and got into talking color for you, whatever video you'd like to create. Color correction, that is. We'll get into some more color theory stuff later on. So head on over to twit.tv/hop and learn about these scopes that I'm showing on the screen.
Fantastic. I always learn something on that show. Well, until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep TWiT.
Is that an iPhone in your hand? Wait a second. Is that an Apple Watch on your wrist? And do I see an iPad sitting there on the table? Oh my goodness. You are the perfect person to be watching iOS Today, the show where Rosemary Orchard and I, Micah Sargent, talk all things iOS, tvOS, watchOS, HomePod OS. It's all the OSs that Apple has on offer, and we show you how to make the most of those gadgets. Just head to twit.tv/iOS to check it out.